Hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink was provided by the wonderful original Mysterious Benefactor, who had sent to me the entire line of inks by the brand K.W.Z. It's a Polish company, and yeah, they had like 60 inks. And one of the things that K.W.Z is really getting noticed for is their very wide selection of Iron-Gall inks. In fact, I think they have about 20. I think I'm only down to like the last 5. I've tested most of them. And today's is Iron-Gall Green number 2. I believe they have 5 or 6 different greens. And then a green gold and a turquoise and yeah. Anyways, yeah, this is number 2. And they come in these interesting little, like, sample vials, but, yeah, they're kind of fun. But today's ink is an Iron-Gall ink. If you don't know much about Iron-Gall, I highly recommend that you go and find my video, K.W.Z Iron-Gall Gold, I believe it is. In that video, I talk a bit more about what Iron-Gall is, how it works, to get you a little more familiarized with it. That video also contains links to some academic sources that I highly recommend you watch. They're just brief little videos on YouTube, and they're very informative, and so if you would like to learn more about Iron-Gall, what it is, how it works, do check out that video. There might be a link down below, or it could just be in the sidebar, but or check my K.W.Z playlist. But yeah, so the rest of this video I'm going to go into it assuming you know at least a little bit about Iron-Gall, how it works, etc. And yeah, so let's get into it. And if you appreciate these reviews, please do express your gratitude down below for the wonderful Mysterious Benefactor. Now, 2 pens I use were these. This is a Pilot Metropolitan with a Japanese medium. And Japanese mediums tend to be a bit more about Western finds. This one's, yeah, I'd say it is. It's right on par there. And this is a JinHao X450. And I love my X450s, and I'm not kidding, I have about 7 of them. Because they all tend to be pretty broad and pretty wet, and this one is no exception. Except you can't really, oh, there you go, you can kind of see through the tines, but yeah, so thought that'd give us a bit of a range there. Now, let's look at some comparables. Now, not all of these will be comparable in performance. Some of them will mostly be by color, because Iron-Gall, as most people know, is fairly water resistant. It's one of its things. It's raison d'etre. But yeah, so here's Iron-Gall Green number 2. And I would just like to point out that I have now well over 600 different swatches. And everything I'm about to show you was the closest I can find, because I don't know if this is going to come through on camera, but there are some lovely blue undertones in here. And it's actually a bit unique, so yeah. Now here's Diamine Green Black, which is a bit darker and has much more yellow. I feel like side to side you can definitely see the more blue in Iron-Gall Green number 2. Next up is Private Reserve Ebony Green, which is extremely saturated and very dark, and I mean even on this 32-pound 100% cotton paper, it's got green sheen everywhere, which is really a feat. Next up is Private Reserve Ebony Blue, which is still very, very green. This one, if anything, is just a touch more green. So like if there was a scale of growing blueness, it would go something like that. Yeah, and then lastly is Private Reserve Sherwood Green, the fast dry version. Because, yeah, the fast dry version is just a little bit different. This one also has some lovely blue undertones, however this one is darker and actually a bit more blue. So, there you go. Now, bear with me while I show you the chromatography, because I actually have developed a bit of a system when it comes to Iron-Gall inks. Alright, so here are the chromatography. Now, they are in progression of how long I let it dry. So this is the one that I did the way you're supposed to, where you put the line of ink and essentially instantly drop it in the water. This one I let dry for however long it took this to dry, which is usually between like 8 and 10 minutes sometimes. This one I let dry for 24 hours, and this one I let dry for 3 days. And I feel like this really demonstrates one of the facts of Iron-Gall inks, and actually the way a lot of Noodler's inks works, this isn't an instant bonding. This is something that takes time. It takes time for the whatever component it is to fuse with the fiber, and it's true for Iron-Gall. Now this one, the one that you do the way you're supposed to, you can still see that very clear gray at the bottom. You can see where the drop was initially put. You see this nice sort of even green here, and then there's this actually very lovely shade of blue up at the top. The one that I let dry for, 8 to 10 minutes, that dot gets darker. And there's slightly more bare patch here, and there's a little less green, and the blue I think is a bit taller. And that pattern essentially continues all the way on. 24 hours, dot gets darker, a little more bare, blue gets a bit more separate and tall. 3 days, that is some very, very dark gray. And this is essentially empty. It just didn't get quite as tall, but that could have been because I didn't leave it in the water as long. But yeah, so I feel that really demonstrates the importance of giving Iron-Gall inks, and actually most permanent inks, time to bond, because that is how Iron-Gall works. It is iron and gallic acid, and the gallic acid sort of activates the paper and sort of forces its pores to open, if you will, to let the iron sink in, and then the iron reacts to the natural water in the atmosphere and the air, because what is iron plus oxygen? Rust, iron oxide. That's how this stuff works. Essentially, you're growing rust in the fibers of your paper, and it's not going to let go, and that's what makes it permanent. It might sound a little gross, but hey, it's been working for hundreds of years. Now, here are my so-called chemical tests. Now, this, I think I gave it 24 hours to dry. So, water test, as you can see, that green component really got moving, but that gray underneath, you can see how the pattern of the smear continued. Where it was heaviest, it remained darker. 1/3 bleach solution, this really surprised me because bleach is an oxidizer. That means it would force that rusting reaction, and usually we get a very dark thing, much like we do here with the ammonia pen flush, but we didn't. For some reason, it is completely gone. It's turned a lighter shade of blue and then disappeared. Now, ammonia pen flush, this is what we usually see with the bleach, but yeah, what it does is, well, the bleach would have destroyed the color, but the ammonia pen flush got the color moving and forced a very dark reaction from the iron in the ink underneath. Now, hydrogen peroxide got a little bit of all of it moving and changed the color just a little bit, and I honestly was not expecting that, but there you go. Now, enough rambling. Tests. Top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Yep, Clairefontaine, man. It's very dense paper, and I hope this will come through, and this keeps happening with these Iron-Gall inks. They have this. You see that? I don't know if that's sheen exactly. It almost looks like sheen, but it is... I wish this would come through on camera. It looks exactly like if you've ever had a garage where you've parked a car and then water gets on the floor and some of the oil from the car sort of sits on top of the little puddle. You get a oil slick kind of shine. It has that quality to it because it's sort of like a black red. It's very interesting. I don't know if this is sheen or what, but so I've said no sheen just because I don't know if this is technically sheen, but whatever it is, it's shiny. It's real shiny. But anyways, as you can see, we have lovely shading. If you like shading, that's very nice. Now, Iron-Gall inks are very dense. I mean, they have iron in them. It's going to take them a while to sink in, especially in very dense papers, tightly woven papers like this. So yeah, that Japanese medium took 20 seconds to dry. That does not surprise me, and especially because this is actually a slight wet flowing ink, which for me is a bit unusual. A lot of my experiences with Iron-Gall inks, they tend to be a little dry. K.W.Z's Iron-Gall inks overall have actually proven to be a bit wet, which is rather nice because, you know, sometimes you need a little oomph to get that iron to flow through your feet a little bit. But yeah. So, that Japanese medium took 20 seconds. The fairly broad and wet JinHao took 40. I usually stop counting at 30, but, I mean, look at the size of that smear. There was a lot of ink being put down. It's fairly dense color, and I feel like in the bottom scrub you really see just how wide a breadth of shading you get, because you can get a very sort of soft leafy green, and then it turns into almost black where it's laid on heavily enough, so that's rather nice. Now, yeah, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. And again, I don't know if I should technically call that oil slick kind of thing sheen, but whatever. Now, the way I've done these water tests is I've done 3 different things. Now, this was the day that I wrote this test. It got an hour to dry. So this is how much was able to remain after an hour. Still a good bit there. It's still fairly dark, fairly readable, dyed the page a little bit, but could be worse. This was after 24 hours. You can tell it got a bit darker, right? And this one I did today, just before I started recording. You can see the steady progression of how dark it gets the more time you leave. Now, the green will release. Like, that green will let go. But look at how dark and clear that is. So, this is about, what, 3 weeks? The more time, the better of a chance you're giving it to let it become truly permanent. Now, this is Fabriano Echoquoi. It's an 85 gram per square meter paper. Honestly, it's my favorite. The more I use it, the more I enjoy it. Here, yeah, I mean, we get sort of more of the same, really. It's quite lovely. Sorry. We get more of that shine, whatever it is. So we get this weird sort of like black, red, slick shininess, and then where it gets dark enough, it's essentially almost turns black. We have lovely shading, and I personally am one who, I do like shading, so I'm quite enjoying it. Now, that Japanese medium took 19 seconds to dry. Fairly broad and wet JinHao took 37. Again, we see the density of color. It's a very solid ink. We do have a little bit of a halo around the wettest parts. I hope that'll show up in the writing. Sort of a dark outline. We definitely see it in the scrubby a little bit with the halos. But yeah, honestly, it's behaving quite well. There's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. And again, I don't know if I should call that sheen, but now again, the one that had an hour to dry, it's still very clear, still very there. Definitely readable. You could absolutely recover that. This, 24 hours, definitely you could have recovered that. And then 3 weeks, you can see that it did get a good bit darker. So, again, more time, more will remain. Now, next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. I feel like pretty much everyone's probably familiar with this stuff. Now, the medium on here took 19 seconds. The fairly brown wet JinHao took 38. And again, we just have an enormous amount of sheen, or this slick, shiny stuff. And actually, I don't know how clear I made this, but we get that in the words. Pretty much anywhere where you've seen the writing get dark enough to the point where it's almost black, that sheen continues in on all these papers so far. If it is sheen, what do I call this? But anyways, fantastic shading. I'm actually quite enjoying the color, this nice sort of blue undertone. It's rather nice. Again, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, and I don't know if I should call that sheen, but sheen question mark. And again, water test, pretty clear, pretty there. Even that Japanese medium, which lays down a fairly thin line, and it only had about an hour to dry. Yeah, I mean, honestly, could be a lot worse. It did pretty well. Now, next up is Fabriano Echoquoi. It's an this is 52 gram per square meter of paper. Wait, what am I saying? This is Tomoe River. It's 52 gram per square meter paper. It's known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times and echo. And we pretty much got all of that because this whole thing is just shiny. Like everything on here is just shiny, shiny, shiny. Like every bit of writing, even the medium, which is the lines are so fine. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it on camera. There we go. But yeah, it's just shiny everywhere. And it definitely drew out the dry times. That's just something that the weave of this paper does. So that Japanese medium took 29 seconds to dry. The fairly brown wet JinHao took 51. Would I like it to be better? Yes, of course I would. But, you know, who's like, you know what, this could do with some worsening. Let's get on that. No. Okay, so, like, honestly, I'll take it. I mean, this is a pretty good combination. It looks very good. We have some very dramatic degree of shading. We get a nice halo effect around the wettest parts. It's particularly noticeable in that X450. We have an intense shine. It gets almost black. It essentially just turns black where it's laid on heavily enough, which is rather interesting. It's almost like having a color-changing ink. And yeah, I say the dry times actually kind of make sense because it's wet flowing. It's an Iron-Gall. It's Tomoe River. Yeah. Now, as I say here, no bleed feather spread because that's just something that Tomoe River doesn't do. However, we do get some echo because this is obscenely thin paper, and this is an ink that is designed to fight its way into the weave of the paper and then sort of latch on, and where it's laid on heavily enough, like we saw here in the scrubby, you know, where so much of it turned almost black, yeah, there's going to be some show through. Now, I was laying it on particularly heavy to make sure I could get some shine when I did record it. So, yeah, that's slightly me exaggerating the circumstances, but here with just the writing, I am particularly sensitive, something I've just acknowledged about myself. I've had to accept it. I am very, very sensitive to echo and show through. This would bother me. The medium, maybe not so much though. But yeah, anyways, echo, as always, is a personal preference. So if you don't particularly care, if you do, consider the factors. That's, you know, as always. Now, the one that got an hour to dry, I was actually expecting a lot more to release because, again, this paper, the weave of it, the way it works, one of the reasons it takes so long for it to dry usually is because it just doesn't absorb. It sort of fights anything sinking into it. So I thought with only an hour to dry, I didn't expect this much to remain. It's still pretty clear, still pretty there. The green is gone. The green is really, really gone. And actually what's interesting is if you look at this one that got 3 weeks, it's not a whole lot darker. It's a little bit darker, like especially if you compare the bits that are the X450, which is this bottom line, and the downstrokes and the large dots. Those did get darker, but honestly, I don't know, maybe if I give it a couple years, because yes, this stuff can be affected by, the more time you give it, the more it'll affect it. So yeah, this could look different years from now. It could have completely different performance years from now. I gave it 3 weeks. Yeah, so next 3 tests, I only used that Japanese medium except to write the name. And this is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. Please believe me, this stuff is utter garbage. I can pretty much guarantee you have something that is at least a step up from this. Now, okay, a lot of times Iron-Gall inks, play really well with cheap paper. They just tend to do pretty okay. Like, they tend to handle it pretty well. This is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper, and it did not handle it well, which is actually probably a surprise to no one. Now, you can see there is a significant degree of spread. So here it is on the Tomoe River. Here it is on the 20-pound. You can see just how much that line width increased. You can see that there is a woolliness to the writing, has sort of a texture. There's sort of, I don't know if it's feathers really, but there's like tiny little bumpiness. It's like almost feathers, like all over along the edge of all the writing, which is not entirely pleasant to look at. It does retain a little bit of shading, but not a ton. It took 4.5 seconds to dry, which kind of makes sense because, you know what, this is an Iron-Gall ink. It takes time to sink in even to cheap papers. But yeah, I say here it could be worse. Like, there's no feathering, but just because I don't know if that's just extreme woolliness or if it's woolliness bordering on feathering with the bumpiness. But yeah, I think there's no bleed, except maybe in the scrubby. But I mean, that was me laying it on in a scrubby. Here in the writing, in most of the writing, you can see it stays very light, very opaque. It doesn't come out the other side. But what it does is, so if we're looking at the page like this, and imagine it's to this scale. The ink is sinking in and then bonding. It's not just resting on the top, giving, you know, this much of the paper in between it and the back, making it, you know, harder to read. It is sinking into the paper, so it's closer to the back, and you can tell that something's there. Me being ridiculously picky, this would bother me. A lot of people, it would not. And again, this is the world's worst paper. I can pretty much guarantee you got something better than this, so bit of this, bit of that. Now, the one that only had an hour to dry, honestly, I'm pretty impressed. Now, this is a more absorbent paper. More absorbent papers tend to draw the ink in, make it harder to wash out. And that's kind of what happened here. But I just want you to see how clear and how dark this writing is. Now, the green bit is trying to wash away, and it is a little distracting. But again, it's absorbent paper. It doesn't want to let go. So, honestly, I feel like if I just flushed it with more water, it would be easier to read. But yeah, so that's absolutely recoverable. You could totally read that. This one that had 3 weeks, or roughly 3 weeks, you can see the lines definitely got a bit darker, but not super significantly. So, now, this is Mead Notebook Paper. It's very common for school children in the United States. This came from a tiny, tiny spiral notebook. I don't know if you can see that there's still like the little bits from the spiral notebook. This is very common for school children in the United States, and again, like I said, usually Iron-Gall inks work really well with sheet paper, so I was not expecting this, because this is a disaster. And it was so bad when I started the testing. I tested to see if I got the late side right, and I did. So this is the late side. This is the side that would have given me better results anyway. As you can tell, because there's lots of bleed. Here we get some show through, but again you can tell how opaque it is. It's still very light, so it sunk into the paper, but it didn't come out the back. So I guess it could be worse. It might not be the most comfortable thing in the world to write on both sides, but nah. It took 5 seconds to dry. We don't really retain a lot of shading. We have an intense amount of feathering. It's very woolly. It is not attractive looking. I will readily admit that. It did not do well here. This was where I was expecting this ink to excel. It didn't, but let's move on. Now, this paper can absolutely freak out when you add water, and it kind of did. The one that got an hour to dry, now yes, the ink is, the green ink is trying to release, but the absorbent paper is trying to hold on to it, so it's sort of fighting. But I want you to look at the gray in the center. Do you see how it's kind of woolly? How it's like got its own texture problems, and how it almost looks like it's starting to feather a little bit? That's worrisome. And then the one that got 3 weeks, it's really just a bit darker, and the green released a bit more, but it's still retaining the similar amount of like feathery wooliness that we get up above. But yeah, again, the green is being pushed out the back, so. Now, lastly is Moleskine notebook paper. Now, I hate Moleskine paper because it is very cheaply made and they make you pay a lot of money for it, and it is very bad paper. Now, a lot of times, Iron-Gall inks can actually work really well on this paper because, as I've said, they actually tend to excel with cheap papers. This one did not, and honestly, I can't be that mad because it's still Moleskine paper. You gotta set the bar really low. Now, yeah, it's hideous. It is hideous. It is ugly. It is intense, gigantic feathers. You can see the pulp that they mashed into the paper. It took 8 seconds to dry. We have tons of bleed. You see how dark these dots are? Pretty much everywhere there's a dot. Like, you know, the eye in Quick, the dots that I used to separate, you know, the Metropolitan and the medium and whatever. Like, all the dots, the scrubby is out the back. A lot of the downstrokes. It's just... I mean, it's a Japanese medium. Yes, it's wet flowing, and yes, it's got acid in it trying to help it sink into the paper, but this is just ridiculous. When the world's worst 20-pound copier paper can do this, and this does this, that's just not okay. But yeah, again, water test, this paper can freak out when you add water, and it did. I mean, look, the green is trying to release, and yet try and stay. But this gray at the center, more than ever, it's really sort of like, it's half breaking up. It's extremely woolly. The one that got 3 weeks, it's just a bit darker, but it's largely more of the same. It's, I don't know, I guess if you had to recover it, you could. Would it be pleasant to look at? No, it would not. But it's not that pleasant to look at in the first place, so, yeah, so, there you go. For your consideration from the Triple N Network. K.W.Z's Iron-Gall Green number 2. It is definitely an Iron-Gall. It has all the facets of Iron-Gall, except it had some things that rather surprised me. It was shading to a great degree, to the point where it almost turns black. It's slightly wet flowing, which is nice because sometimes you want that with an Iron-Gall because it can be hard to get out of your nibs. It's extremely waterproof, and the longer you give it to sort of settle into the paper, the better the results you're going to get on that front. I quite enjoyed the color. It has this lovely soft blue facet to it. It's quite pretty. Yeah, so there you go for your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.